Sometimes the people we love the most see us as the enemy. Here's why. It happens quietly, like all heartbreaks do. One day you wake up and realize someone out there thinks you're the bad guy. Maybe they tell that story to others, how you hurt them, how you changed, how you walked away. Maybe they don't speak of you at all, but you can feel it. The distance, the coldness, the silence that used to be laughter. You scroll through old photos, read old messages, and wonder when exactly you turned from their comfort into their cautionary tale. And here's the truth that stings the most. In their version of the story, they're right. You did hurt them. You did walk away. You did change. But what they'll never see, what most people never do, is the why that lives underneath. The why that kept you up at night. The why that ate at your conscience. The why that you couldn't explain without sounding cruel or defensive. That's the hardest part about being human. Every story has two truths, but the world only ever wants to hear one. You spend your whole life trying to be the good person, the kind one, the one who explains, the one who makes sure no one misunderstands you. But eventually you realize that no matter how gently you speak, someone will always twist your silence into guilt. Someone will always decide that you're the reason for their pain. And maybe you are, but not in the way they think. No one tells you that healing can make you look heartless, that boundaries can make you seem cold, that saying, "I can't do this anymore," can sound like betrayal to the person who depended on your endurance. They'll call it abandonment, but you'll call it survival. They'll call it selfishness, but you'll call it finally breathing. Sometimes being the villain in someone's story is the price of choosing yourself. And yet, that doesn't make it easy. You replay the moments in your head, the fight, the final message, the silence that followed. You wish you could rewrite it. You wish you could show them the version of you that cried after they left, the version that didn't want to hurt anyone but simply couldn't keep breaking yourself to stay. But stories don't work like that. Once people decide who you are to them, every act, every word, every absence becomes proof of their version. If you reach out, you're manipulative. If you stay silent, you're cold. If you explain, you're defensive. If you apologize, you're guilty. There's no winning once the label sticks. And maybe that's the lesson. You stop fighting to be understood. You stop trying to convince others that your pain was also real. You start learning to live with the fact that you'll never get to clear your name in every heart you once touched. You start to accept that sometimes closure doesn't come with justice. It comes with surrender. People love to divide others into heroes and villains because it makes pain easier to digest. If they can blame you, they don't have to face the parts of themselves that let it happen. You become a mirror they can throw stones at instead of the reflection that forces them to look deeper. But here's the quiet truth no one talks about. Every villain was once someone who tried too hard to be good. Every villain has a backstory full of sleepless nights, of swallowed words, of trying to please everyone until something inside them broke. You didn't wake up one day and decide to be cruel. You just reached a breaking point where silence felt safer than speaking, where leaving felt kinder than staying. And yet, guilt follows you like a shadow. Not because you were wrong, but because you still care. Because no matter how justified your choices were, some part of you still aches at the thought of being misunderstood. You wish you could make them see the full picture, that love and pain can coexist, that endings don't mean villains and heroes, that maybe you both did your best with the tools you had. But maturity teaches you this. Not everyone heals at the same speed, and not everyone is ready to see your humanity while they're still nursing their wounds. Some people need you to be the villain to protect their own peace. And that's okay. It's not your job to fix the narrative in someone else's mind. It's your job to live in alignment with your truth, even if it makes you look like the antagonist in theirs. And when the guilt comes, and it will, remind yourself of this. growth and guilt often arrive hand in hand. Because every time you evolve, you'll outgrow someone's comfort zone. Every time you shed an old version of yourself, someone will feel abandoned by the person you used to be. But evolution isn't betrayal. It's honesty in motion. Once you accept that you are the villain in someone's story, something shifts. Not immediately, not like a switch flips, but gradually, subtly, like sunlight creeping into a room you forgot existed. It starts with the small understanding that their story doesn't define your life. Their perception isn't the map of your soul, and the weight you've been carrying, the crushing responsibility to be perfect, to be always right, to be liked, begins to lighten little by little. You start noticing patterns in yourself that you hadn't dared to name before. The way you apologize too quickly, the way you over-explain your choices, the way you replay conversations, hoping that if you could just tweak your words, you could change someone's mind. That's the ghost of the child who feared rejection, who believed that if people didn't approve of you, they wouldn't love you. That fear is still alive, still whispering, still demanding proof that you are safe, that you are worthy, that you are good enough. And yet, you also begin to see the courage in your actions, because it takes bravery to step away from someone who misunderstands you. It takes guts to honor your own boundaries when the world has trained you to erase them. It takes an enormous, quiet kind of heroism to live according to your truth, even if it paints you as the antagonist in someone else's narrative. There's a liberation in this realization. The world will always have people who misread you, who mislabel you, who tell stories that leave you sounding cruel, selfish, or cold. And there will always be parts of you that wish they could see the whole picture. But freedom comes when you stop trying to fit their understanding, when you stop performing for an audience that never really wanted to see you, and instead, you perform for yourself. Not perfection, not compliance, not a mask of goodness, but authenticity. And authenticity, you realize, is more radical than any act of rebellion you ever attempted, because it requires you to sit with your own contradictions, to look at your flaws and failures and say, "This is me, fully alive, fully human." No edits, no apologies, no explanations. You may still feel the sting of guilt at times. That's natural. The mind likes to rehearse all the ways you could have been better. The heart likes to mourn all the ways you might have hurt someone. And it's okay to let it feel those things, to honor the sorrow, to respect the pain, to acknowledge the mistakes. But the difference now is that guilt is no longer a leash. It's no longer a chain keeping you tethered to someone else's perception. It becomes a teacher, a compass pointing you toward better choices, toward compassion, toward self-awareness. And slowly you start to forgive yourself, not in a single dramatic moment, but in 1,000 quiet decisions. The time you allow yourself to rest instead of over-explain. The time you speak your truth instead of bending it to be palatable. The time you let someone feel your honesty, even if it scares them. Each act of self-compassion is a brick in the foundation of a life that belongs to you, not to the expectations, stories, or judgments of anyone else. Forgiveness, you discover, isn't just about others. It's about reclaiming your right to exist without apology. You forgive yourself for the times you weren't perfect. You forgive yourself for choosing your own needs over theirs. You forgive yourself for being human in a world that demanded superhuman. And as you do, a quiet power grows inside you. Not the loud, visible power that the world praises, but the deep, unshakable kind that lives in knowing who you are, no matter how anyone else tells your story. There will be moments when the old labels creep back in, when someone's words cut sharper than you expect, when the reflection of yourself in their eyes feels distorted and unfair. And in those moments, you return to the truth. You are not defined by anyone else's perception. You are not the villain. You are not a mistake. You are a human being navigating a world that doesn't always understand human complexity. And here's the beauty. Once you release the burden of proving yourself, once you stop trying to rewrite their narrative, you start noticing the other stories waiting for you. Stories that welcome you without judgment. Stories that celebrate the messy, imperfect, evolving person you truly are. Stories in which love doesn't come with a ledger of your failures and accomplishments. Stories in which connection is possible without having to earn it. You start to speak differently, too. Not because you want to convince anyone, but because your words finally match your heart. You no longer over-apologize, over-explain, or preemptively defend. You speak with clarity, with intention, with authenticity. And the people who are meant to hear you, the ones whose hearts are ready, they do. They listen, they see you, they accept you. And in their presence, you realize that you have always deserved this kind of recognition, this kind of understanding, this kind of belonging. And perhaps the most profound part of all of this is the compassion you develop for others, including the ones who painted you as the villain. You start to understand that their story was shaped by their own fears, their own wounds, their own lack of perspective. And this doesn't excuse harm, but it humanizes it. It allows you to step back from resentment, to hold space for your own healing without carrying the weight of their mistakes as your own. You begin to see that life is not about being the hero or the villain in someone else's story. It's about being fully present in your own. It's about learning to navigate love, loss, and imperfection with honesty. It's about holding your own hand when no one else does, speaking your own truths when the world is silent, and allowing yourself to be seen without apology. And slowly, very slowly, you realize that freedom has nothing to do with others changing their minds. Freedom has nothing to do with being proven right or justified. Freedom lives in your ability to claim your story, to live it authentically, and to honor the parts of yourself that have been misunderstood for too long. There will still be nights when doubt creeps in, when the old fears whisper that you are too much, too selfish, too loud, too complicated. And that's okay. Lean into those nights. Sit with them. They are reminders of the courage it takes to live authentically in a world that expects simplicity. And when morning comes, you rise again, not because anyone demanded it, not because anyone validated you, but because you have decided to exist fully, unapologetically, and truthfully. And perhaps when you look back on this journey years from now, you will understand something profound. Being labeled a villain does not diminish your humanity. Being misunderstood does not erase your love. Being blamed does not strip away your worth. All it does is teach you the most important lesson of all, that the only story you are required to honor is your own. And in honoring it, you finally discover something that has always been waiting for you. Peace, not earned but claimed. Love, not conditional but given freely to yourself. And truth, not perfect but real. You realize at last that the villain in someone else's story can also be the hero in your own. Because in the end, the only person you were ever meant to protect, understand, and love unconditionally was always yourself.